Vladimir Putin, we've always known he was a pretty brutal guy. You had some experience with Putin earlier in his career. You've told me here on air that when you were with CIA, Putin was not considered that important of a KGB operative, an FSB operative, right? He was relatively middle management. And where was he, Scott? You had told me he was in some region that wasn't even too strategically significant.
Yeah, he was in East Germany, and he was a colonel. But what I'm saying is, his career was not particularly noteworthy when he was in the KGB, because he was not rewarded with a prized Moscow slot. He was instead, after his tour abroad, which is a big deal, was a big deal in the Soviet Union. He was sent back to St. Petersburg or Leningrad,
that was
north. And so, as it was kind of a backwater, it was kind of like AAA ball versus Major League. And so obviously he had come up maybe short when he was in East Germany. However, by doing so, he got aligned with all of the St. Petersburg power brokers, the mayor of St. Petersburg and all this. And then that by coincidence just catapulted his career forward. So ironically, if he had been a more successful officer, he would have been in Moscow, and he would have been one of 12,000 KGB colonels who were walking around without a sense of direction after the Soviet Union fell.
So by being in an outpost, like you say, an A- city outpost, he was able to shine and then get on the radar of the hierarchy in Moscow, where had he been in Moscow, he would have been buried under a bunch of other generals and colonels with family connections.
Exactly.
Never would have.
It was just one of those quote lucky things, unquote. Maybe not lucky for us, but definitely lucky for him.
Well, he's a bold guy, right? Because he's out there poisoning people on British soil. I mean, it doesn't seem like he cares about much on his path to the top. So let's talk a little bit about this. There's a lot of news on this. I know a lot of people are confused as to the details. So basically, the gist of this uproar, which also dovetails with why some people are upset that the president congratulated Putin, is that Putin is sending operatives, presumably his own internal operatives, former intelligence community holdovers, maybe current Russian intelligence community, to poison people, most significantly on British soil. Now, that could be considered an act of war, could it not?
Certainly, and this is something the Russians have done before. They've liquidated people, for the last 70 years, especially defectors and people like that, as a message to the others. You see, so we have to understand, like, this guy was a former GRU officer, a military intel officer, who had in fact spied for the British in like maybe the 90s and had been found out by the Russians and had been put in prison. Later, he was freed in a prisoner exchange, like in the movies where they go on the bridge and they meet.
Right.
And the British exchanged some Russian intelligence officers they had caught red-handed in Britain or something, and they exchanged them for this guy Skripal. So the guy Skripal comes back to England to live a quiet life. And actually, Putin's attempted assassination of him basically breaks kind of an unwritten rule of espionage, and that is, I mean, once somebody's involved in a prisoner exchange, you don't go around trying to eliminate them.
Right,
so he's broken that unwritten law. But the habit of liquidating just in general people who have a problem with the regime, who defect to other countries, that's been part of the Soviet and Russian playbook for like 75 years.
So that's the story, because I was trying to grab the details, and that's a great explanation of it. So the guy becomes a British asset. He's spying on the Soviets, double agent of sorts, right? He gets arrested by the Russians. They exchange him back to the Brits, and Putin says, "Wait a second, I'm going to hold this old grudge," and he goes out there and he tries to kill the guy.
Right, because that way maybe it'll make other people in Russia think twice before they decide to cooperate with the West. So that's the idea, and that's why they've always done that. That's why they, killed Trotsky with an ice pick in 1939 in Mexico City or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Or using a gas gun with gas pellets to shoot gas into the face of a guy who answers the door, who is a Ukrainian nationalist in Germany. The guy immediately dies, and it absolutely looks like a heart attack.
This is very, very important content, and I want to bring it to you every day. So help me do that by subscribing to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows.